Wyoming legislators will begin their 2024 session today considering Governor Gordon's $10.8 billion budget. The former mayor of Casper is suing an airplane repair company over a near-fatal crash in 2022. And a Saratoga councilman and father of three died in an avalanche in the Medicine Bow National Forest. We'll take a look at these stories and more today from Wyoming's largest news organization. I'm Wendy Corr for Cowboy State Daily. When Wyoming legislators begin their 2024 session today, they'll start with Governor Mark Gordon's proposed $10.8 billion budget and 205 bills that have already been introduced. To get any legislation introduced that isn't the budget, a two-thirds majority vote is required, which means many of those 200-plus standalone bills will likely not advance. Those that do will require at least some level of compromise and collaboration between the Wyoming Freedom Caucus and the Wyoming Caucus, the two competing Republican factions of the state House. The 5 Democrats in the House could also play a role, swinging a balance to either side. Legislators will have until noon Wednesday to submit their draft bills to the Legislative Service Office. Any bill that hasn't been introduced on the floor of either chamber by Friday won't be considered during the 2024 session. Former Casper Mayor Bruce Nell is suing Casper Air Service and Natrona Avionics over a near-fatal crash in 2022. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that the lawsuit accuses the repair shops of not fixing the fuel system in his plane.
Bruce Nell's plane went down in the spring of 2022. He said at the time his fuel system failed 3,700 feet from the ground and he had to crash land in a field. He said that his back and his wife's back were both broken and they had several other injuries. He filed suit on Thursday against the repair companies and the repairman who reportedly were tasked with fixing the fuel system just before that flight. He's alleging negligence and willful and wanton misconduct.
He's asking for monetary compensation for his injuries and the destruction of his 1976 Piper Lance, as well as for punitive damages. With price hikes that have some non-resident elk tags scraping the $2,000 mark, sticker shock might be keeping some hunters away. But Outdoors reporter Mark Hines says Wyoming still retains a strong pull for hunters all over the country.
I talked to a gentleman who lives in Wyoming now. He's been a Wyoming resident for 14 years, but he's hunted Wyoming as both a non-resident and a resident, and he hunts in several states. He said, on one hand, this does seem like it's getting really pricey and obnoxiously expensive. On the other, Wyoming is special. People will pay what they need to pay to hunt here.
Non-resident hunting tags have always been more expensive than resident tags, but price increases for the non-resident special drawings, which were approved last year by the Wyoming legislature, did widen the gap considerably in some cases. I'll be back with more news right after this.
Did you know it's illegal to dig or excavate without knowing what's below? This is Jan Warren, Executive Director for Oneall of Wyoming. We will be hosting workshops around the state to educate homeowners, realtors, landscapers, underground facility owners, and excavators on the state law, industry best practices when it comes to planting a tree, building a fence, or any other excavation project you have planned. Join us for a free breakfast, get your questions answered, and learn how Oneall of Wyoming is here to help. Go to oneallofwyoming.com and register today.
Saratoga Town Councilman Jacob Flutie died Thursday when he was caught in an avalanche while snowmobiling in an area of the Medicine Bow National Forest known as Avalanche Alley. The 34-year-old was a lifelong Saratoga resident who friends describe as a live life to the fullest kind of guy. He leaves behind a wife and 3 young children. Carbon County Sheriff Alex Bakken said that Flutie died when his snowmobile was caught in an avalanche while riding in the Sierra Madre Range. He was riding with another person when they were both caught. Flutie was buried in the avalanche and was already dead by the time his companion located him. And no one knows more about solar panels and how they affect grazing sheep than Oregon State Professor Chad Higgins, who's considered the world's foremost authority in agrivoltaics. Now Cowboy State Daily's Pat Mayo says Higgins is helping a $500 million solar farm project near Glen Rock.
Now he's the expert in the world. He's getting calls from China, Turkey, UK, several countries in Europe, energy companies across the United States. And this is the first one he's advised on in Wyoming. And I'm sure he'll be back since grazing sheep is such a big industry here in Wyoming that I could almost envision that other solar farms will be calling this gentleman for advice as well.
The American Solar Grazing Association said that it expects the number of acres of solar farms at which sheep are feeding is likely to exceed 50,000. And that's today's news. Get your free digital subscription to Wyoming's only statewide newspaper by hitting the subscribe button on CowboyStateDaily.com. I'm Wendy Corr for Cowboy State Daily.